This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. Well, there were dramatic scenes at the White House today during a meeting between President Donald Trump and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Donald Trump dimmed the lights and played a video showing the president footage from South Africa where leaders had been calling for violence against white South Africans. Now, this, of course, comes after 50 South African refugees were flown to America last week, sending the left-wing media into a meltdown. But this is what unfolded at the White House.
Lights down, turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission.
Now this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning.
So Donald Trump brings the receipts and the left-wing media is once again freaking out about the showdown. Let's look at the coverage. The media's headlines are all pretty much the same. Outlets are simply rolling out the same sort of lines. The Guardian's headline is Trump ambushes South African president with video and false claim of white racism. We've got NPR, Daily News, the New York Times and BBC all describing this as an ambush. And look, I'm not saying that Donald Trump's behaviour is perfect, but he is brilliant at shining a light on issues that parts of the mainstream media do not want to cover. And as for foreign leaders visiting the White House, well, they are being put on notice that Donald Trump is not afraid to call out issues as the cameras are rolling. South Africa's president denies claims of genocide and harassment, but after watching the footage and taking questions from reporters, was forced to admit that he opposes what he saw.
Denounce that type of language in the video that you saw?
Oh yes, we've always done so. As government, as my own party, we are completely opposed to that. We, in 1955, adopted a document which said South Africa belongs to all who live in it.
But why wouldn't you arrest that man? That man said, kill the white farmers, kill the white farmers. And then he danced, and he's dancing, and it's kill the white farmers. I'm not sure, but I think if somebody got up in Parliament and started saying kill a certain group of people, he would be arrested very quickly. That man is going all over South Africa, and that's not a small party. That was a stadium that holds 100,000 people, and I hardly saw an empty seat. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of representation.
It's time for Media Meltdowns. Well, this week we learned that Joe Biden has stage 4 prostate cancer. And I've said before, I sincerely wish that the former president gets the best treatment available. But right now, serious questions are being raised about when Joe Biden and those closest to him knew. And how is it that someone with the access to the best medical care on the planet, someone who's supposedly the leader of the free world, wasn't given a PSA test? That we're only finding out about this now, that Joe Biden has the most advanced stage of prostate cancer.
It is interesting to note that President Trump's, President Obama's, and President Bush II, in their most recent physicals, in their terms of office, obviously 2025 for President Trump, did comment on their PSA levels. And so they got screened while in office, and they commented on it. It's not easy to access the most recent ones from President Biden.
So George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump all had their PSA prostate tests reported with results when they were president. Yet for some reason, it's a completely different story when it comes to Joe Biden. Well, according to this expert on CBS, Joe Biden didn't really need to get screened for cancer because he was too old.
Normally, doctors will stop screening for prostate cancer at 75 or so because after that, the prostate cancers you typically pick up are very slow growing. And so the harms of all of the testing and treatment for something that may not kill you, you're talking about risk versus benefit. It may not be worth the risk.
Not worth the risk. Not sure about that one. Doctors are astounded that the former president has only just discovered that his cancer has spread to his bones. Why wasn't it caught before, and why wasn't he being tested? And where should Americans turn to for honest coverage about this? Maybe the mainstream media, the same people who told you a year ago this truth.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it.
I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline. Okay. That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
you have
to watch somebody on stage
it's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
And isn't it amazing that Jake Tapper has no problem that he spent years straight up lying to the American people that there were no legitimate concerns over Biden's cognitive decline, is right now profiting from a book he's written, which is essentially about how Lara Trump was right. Jake Tapper has become a laughingstock, and so has CNN, for shamelessly promoting this bombshell book that he expects the American people to buy.
Breaking news in our politics lead, and a brand new excerpt from my upcoming book with Axios' Alex Thompson. It's called Original Sin. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's on Biden's decline. It's called Original Sin. I'm sure you've heard on May 20th. That's Tuesday. Original Sin. That's coming out in 3 weeks. On May 20th. That's just 19 days away. In 1 week and 1 day. Coming out in just a few days. Comes out Tuesday. You will not believe what we found out.
News people have to tell you what they know when they find it out? Isn't that the difference between news and a secret?
Wouldn't that be helpful if we had some real news from CNN? And Jon Stewart had another simple message for Jake Tapper.
Forgetting about the fact how weird it is that the news is selling you a book about news they should have told you was news a year ago for free.
He's not wrong. Sky News was one of the few places that was covering Biden's decline from the very beginning. And now Jake Tapper has reportedly hired a PR agency to try and help him spin his way through this media tour where, after being complicit in the Biden cover-up, which is one of the biggest political scandals of all time, he's now promoting his tell-all book, Original Sin, so he can sell as many books as possible. But this is quickly turning into an apology tour. Here he is getting absolutely grilled by Meghan Kelly.
Much attention outside of conservative media at all. And Alex and I are here to say that conservative media was right and conservative media was correct. And that there should be a lot of soul searching, not just among me, but among the legacy media to begin with, all of us, for how this was covered or not covered sufficiently. 100%. So, I mean, I'm not here to defend coverage that I've already acknowledged I wish I could do differently.
And although Jake Tapper has no issue with making money from a book that he's written after seriously misleading the American people when it mattered, it's somehow better than the type of commentary you get from watching The View, because hosts like Whoopi Goldberg insist that there's nothing to see here really when it comes to Biden's decline. We all have to move on. And other hosts try to suggest that Jake Tapper should be writing a book about Trump's mental acuity.
So should anonymous sources who talked to Tapper have spoken up about their concerns while he was in office, while he was still in office? And my other question is, why is this important to know now?
Yeah. Well, that's what some people want to know.
It just seems to me, you know, we got a lot of stuff to be concerned about at the moment.
When is Jake Tapper going to write a book about the cognitive decline of the person who is in charge right now?
Parts of the mainstream media are absolutely delulu. Joining us now is newsroom editor at Unheard, James Billow. James, it's great to see you. There are, of course, no surprises that the hosts of The View just cannot handle covering the issue of Joe Biden's mental decline, and neither can Don Lemon. He wants the world to just move on and never look back.
People are saying this whole thing about was Joe Biden incapacitated mentally and all of that. I think America has moved on from that. I think America knows that Joe Biden was an old man. And whether he was selfish and all of those things, okay, that'll history books that will play out. I don't believe that if Joe Biden was in office, and look, I could be wrong, and that he had, known something like this or had cancer, I don't think that they would have kept it from the public. But I think the country's in another place now. The country has moved on, and the country is concerned really about the person who is in office now.
James, it's one of the biggest political scandals in history, yet hosts of The View and Don Lemon are just trying to desperately make it about Donald Trump.
I find the whole thing bizarre. I'm in America as we speak, and I can tell you quite emphatically, the country has not moved on by any stretch. And just as you think you get to the end of one news cycle about bad Biden news, you get another one, and then we have this cancer diagnosis. And we've had people like David Axelrod coming out and saying, well, perhaps we should mute the conversation a little bit. But actually, it reinforces it. It should amplify it even further, because just how ill and sickly was this poor man in office. And yes, Don Lemon is right. We knew he was an old man, but he was an old man who was the most powerful person in the world. And you just cannot sweep this kind of thing under the rug. And what scares me for the Biden family is that I'm sure there's going to be more to come after this, and this is only the beginning. So let's see how that pans out.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Let's talk about that cancer diagnosis. Again, sincerely hope that Joe Biden gets the best treatment possible, but there are so many questions around why his stage 4 cancer was not caught earlier. It's been revealed that his last known PSA test, this of course is a blood test used to screen for prostate cancer, was in 2014. That's rather convenient. Donald Trump says that his doctor needs to be questioned. Let's take a listen.
Given to everybody, but it's given just about. And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9, I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him. Well, he said, if it's the same doctor, he said there was nothing wrong there, and that's being proven to be a sad situation. In other words, there are things going on that the public wasn't informed, and I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor, if it's the same, or even if it's two separate doctors. Why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think the doctor said he's just fine, and it's turned out.
James, when the American people have been lied to so many times about Joe Biden's cognitive decline, about the origins of COVID, about Hunter Biden's laptop, there are, of course, going to be pretty big questions about his cancer diagnosis too. Was this also a cover-up? Why wasn't he tested for it earlier? I mean, what's your take on all of this?
I completely agree. The level of deception we're seeing at every layer of this administration is just quite extraordinary. And, to that point, you don't get to a Gleason score of 9 on cancer without any kind of prior knowledge to this disease. And the facts are, this is the most medically analyzed man in the planet. And as I'm sure Trump gets his his yearly physical, so was Joe Biden. It beggars belief that this wasn't spotted earlier. Now, what I suspect is that I know that the Biden campaign and his advisors are famously tight-lipped. They don't like anything get out. Now, we already knew that they were already trying to cover up his cognitive decline, his clear signs of infirmity that were coming through, particularly in those last 2 years of his presidency. And this is just another notch on that belt. And I really would not be surprised, as I mentioned before, that more stuff is going to be coming out. We should be prepared for it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there are also questions, well, there are certainly more questions than answers at this point. And the people around Joe Biden and his family really have a lot to answer for. It was this time last year that Jill Biden was still campaigning for her husband to continue running in the election campaign. She was straight up lying to the American people that he was mentally fit. Now, we knew that that was a lie then. Everyone could see it, and we know for sure it was a lie now. But it's, of course, now been revealed that he wasn't properly tested for cancer in more than a decade. And now a DOJ official, Leo Terrell, has suggested that it is elder abuse, and that has even raised the question whether Jill Biden could face criminal charges. But he's not the only person kind of suggesting that Jill Biden should be charged with elder abuse. Washington Post columnist Sally Quinn also called out Jill Biden for pushing her husband to run for re-election despite his health problems. Look, I do think the people around Joe Biden who are spending the most time with him, encouraging him to run again, really have a lot to answer for.
I agree wholeheartedly. And we just had a story today about Joe Biden's top advisor, Mike Donald Long, getting paid something like $4 million when the next campaign manager was getting something like $300,000. So the level of cash that was flowing into these coffers was just quite extraordinary. And I completely agree. Jill Biden, Lady McBiden, was a central figure in all of this. She was really pushing her husband to run for that second election. And she probably knew better than anyone else, given her proximity to her husband, just what a bad state he was. And the fact that she kept pushing him on is just extraordinary. And I'll never forget what all these reports said the day after, or actually in the evening of that horrifying debate for Joe Biden. Jill Biden went rushing up to her husband saying, "Oh, what a great job you did. You knew all the facts. You're an absolute star out there," completely disregarding what 350 other million Americans saw. And, this level of self-delusion, I cannot understand why she put her husband through that. And I still can't.
Yeah, I'll never forget those scenes as well. It was painful to watch, actually, running up to her husband saying, "You answered all the questions." It was just unbelievable. But there have been dramatic scenes at the White House today. Donald Trump invited South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to the White House and showed him a video of alleged violence against white South Africans. And this, of course, comes after the United States accepted around 50 white South African refugees. Now, the media is calling this an ambush. We know that Donald Trump is not a standard politician. A lot of people criticise the way he handles diplomacy. But what do you make of what unfolded today?
Well, this is exactly why people like Donald Trump, or at least half the country does, and it's for demonstrations exactly like this. He is going to surprise you in every way, shape, or form, whether you like it or not. And he is the ultimate disruptor. He challenges the status quo, and you know what? He gets leaders thinking. He gets them off their feet, and he surprises them. And this threat to South Africa, he has cut off all supply and all aid to them at the moment. The Cyril Ramaphosa came cap in hand asking for more support, and he was trying to go in this back and forth with some technological support and surveillance and preventing criminality in the country and stuff like that. And Donald Trump likes to have these conversations in front of the camera. It's part of his transparent drive, and I think it's quite refreshing to see politicians behave like that, even if you don't necessarily agree with what he's saying. And that's just a fundamental part of his presidency.
Look, I agree with you. And he brought in evidence, he brought in the receipts, he brought in the video for everyone to see, and he's certainly good at highlighting certain issues. But Trump has also revealed that the United States will soon begin construction of a Golden Dome missile defence system that they say will be a game changer in protecting the American homeland. So, of course, this is a similar system to the Iron Dome in Israel, and it's expected to cost $175 billion. Trump says that he expects a major phase of the dome will be completed in less than 3 years. Let's take a listen.
People that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing. Today I'm pleased to announce that we have officially selected an architecture for this state-of-the-art system that will deploy next-generation technologies across the land, sea, and space, including space-based sensors and interceptors. And Canada has called us, and they want to be a part of it. So we'll be talking to them. They want to have protection also. So as usual, we help Canada do the best we can. This design for the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years.
James, what's the reaction been to this over in the States?
Well, I actually think this could be one of the defining achievements of his entire presidency, if he is able to pull this off. There's no question that this is a high-stakes gamble, and to try and replicate the Iron Dome over a country the size of Israel for something like the United States of America would be a colossal achievement. There's absolutely no question about that. What I like about this policy or this initiative is that it's very forward-facing, it's very future-facing. The future warfare is not going to be happening on planet Earth, it is going to be happening in space. And we already see that China and Russia are developing these space-based technologies that can then strike America from wherever they are in the world. And I think Donald Trump is doing the exact right thing to find some kind of defensive system that can not only destabilize and push these sort of attacks away, but can respond in kind too. So again, it's part of this mantra, speak softly, carry a big stick. And Donald Trump is very much embodying that.
Okay, and the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, has revealed that he's going to be spending a lot less on political campaigns. We know that Elon, he made these comments via a video conference during a Bloomberg forum in Doha. Let's take a listen.
I think in terms of political spending, I'm going to do a lot less in the future.
And why is that?
I think I've done enough.
Is it because of blowback?
Well, if I see a reason to do political spending in the future, I will do it. I do not currently see a reason.
Elon Musk donated more than $250 million to Trump's campaign, and his comments come after all the work he's done establishing and leading DOGE, which, although it hasn't reached its financial target yet, it has slashed $160 billion in federal spending. What do you make of Elon's comments? Is this a pretty big setback for the Republicans?
No, I think Elon is going back to doing what he does best, and that's managing his 17 or 18 companies or whatever. I think this is the best application of his skill set. And what he accomplished, particularly in Donald Trump's campaign, where, as you mentioned, that sort of $250 million plus infusion into the campaign really swung those states like places like Pennsylvania and the like. And it was actually the novelty of some of these innovations that he was using during those campaigns really got the grassroots going. And so I really don't think you can underestimate Elon Musk's contribution to Donald Trump's election campaign success. As for DOGE, it's not over. It's going to carry on. Musk did say he's going to be there 2 days a week or something like that. But I do think this is a necessary divergence, and it was going to happen eventually. He still has to worry about Tesla, the Boring Company, and all the other ones. So we'll have to see how that all pans.
Yeah, it's phenomenal what's on his plate. Elon's also spoken about the legacy media and how it's been effective at making you believe things that simply aren't true. Let's listen to him.
My question is more about your work at DOGE, for example. Was that worth it? You know, to the extent you are now, Elon, you were a somewhat divisive figure 2 years ago, but now you really are. I mean, there are people who love you, but there are a lot of people who dislike you, some of whom were your customers. And I wonder, was it worth the undertaking at DOGE and everything else that you've done and how outspoken you've been in terms of the things you believe in to antagonize so many potential buyers and or users of things like a robo-taxi?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, what I've learned is that legacy media propaganda is very effective at making people believe things that aren't true.
What would an example of that be?
That I'm a Nazi, for example. Right. And how many legacy media publications, talk shows, whatever, try to claim that I was a Nazi because of some random hand gesture at a rally where all I said was that my heart goes out to you, and I was talking about space travel.
I think his comments about the legacy media are absolutely valid. What do you make of it?
Yeah, completely agree. But for anyone doubting Elon Musk for whatever reason, don't just take it from him. Take it from legacy media's very own Jake Tapper, who he himself said that, yes, the legacy media needs to ask itself some serious questions about why it was not covering the Biden second campaign in the same way that conservative media was, when there were clear signs of cognitive decline. So yes, I think this really, I'm hoping, will be a kind of watershed moment for legacy media where they do start having these conversations with themselves, particularly when one of its major stars is sticking his head above the parapet to talk about this. And I hope that going forward, although I'm admittedly not particularly optimistic about this, that there will be some changes in how they approach this, and maybe they'll even, dare I say it, hire some conservatives, but that's a long way away. Maybe it's a bit of a pipe dream.
One can hope. I really appreciate it. James Billow, newsroom editor at Unheard, thanks so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you. Take care.
Joining us now from Melbourne is the Spectator Australia's Fire at Will podcast host, Will Kingston. Will, it's great to see you in Australia. Although you're in Melbourne, we have to start with what's going on in the UK. Last week, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer announced that his Labor Party is implementing tough new immigration laws with regards to work, family settlement and student visas. Now, in my opinion, this has nothing to do with his core values of keeping, borders secure, and has everything to do with the rise of Nigel Farage's party, Reform UK. Now, we know that Farage's popularity has absolutely skyrocketed. And now Keir Starmer is battling, within his own party against MPs, and the rest of the public is, quite sceptical about what he actually believes. So what's your take on all of this? Will Starmer's flip-flopping actually help him, or will people see right through it?
Gabriella, I agree with everything you just said, with one important amendment, and that is you made an assumption that Keir Starmer has core values, and I'm not sure that he does. Look, the problem is that you can't just take the public for idiots like this. When you have a record over a long period of time where you've been open borders, where you've been anti-Brexit, where you've been pro-multiculturalism, and suddenly, after you get absolutely hammered in local council elections and your party is facing an existential wipeout, you suddenly go to the right of Nigel Farage. So the problem is for him goes to credibility. No one believes him. In many respects, it was a strong speech, but it was a strong speech by a weak man, and everyone knows that he's a weak man when it comes to borders. So I don't think it will work. The latest polls have said that he is the second least popular Prime Minister, or has the second lowest number for favourability in recorded UK political history. I can't see it getting any better. If he can make a dent on the numbers of legal and illegal migration over a long period of time, don't forget that there is an election in 2029, maybe he can start to claw back that perception. But the fact of the matter is no one believes him in the UK.
Yeah, and he set no real targets, so you can't really hold him accountable. So, it's an interesting one. But can you talk to us about Nigel Farage? He's had the momentum behind him for some time, but he's still dominating in the polls. Why is that?
Well, I go back to what you said about core values. I think he has a series of core values, and I think those values are aligned with the moment that the UK faces. So really, what he's just saying is that mass migration in the UK has changed the cultural fabric of the country, and this is now the #1 defining issue in the United Kingdom. It will be in Australia in years to come, by the way, but the UK has reached crisis point on it, and he is talking a big game on that. And also, he is playing into the fact that the Conservative Party have effectively squandered their recent time in office. They haven't come out strongly enough, really, to say that we are now a Conservative Party again, as opposed to the centrist or soft left party they have been. So he's just doing what a Conservative Party should say they should do on the tin. He's basically saying we're going to be pro-business, we're going to go back to a reduced migration, and we're going to have pride in the United Kingdom again. And I think there is a lesson in that for Australia as well, in that if you actually have a bit of gumption, if you have a bit of backbone, and you say, these are Conservative values, we're not going to be cowed by the establishment media, we're not going to be cowed by other politicians who say we need to move to the centre, as is what we heard in the Australian election, there is a lane for you. But unfortunately, it requires a charismatic leader, and it requires someone who has really strong political skills like Farage in order to do that. And there aren't many of those in Australia, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're absolutely right. Let's talk about free speech in the UK. Conservative commentator Charlie Kirk posted on X today, if you want to renew your love of America, spend 3 days in the UK, you will kiss the ground when you get back home. And look, I bring that up because a mother who was jailed for a tweet that she posted after the Southport murders has now spoken out. Lucy Connelly was jailed for 31 months in October for posting a tweet. She was jailed for inciting racial hatred, and her appeal against her sentence has been dismissed. Will, can you bring us up to speed on what Lucy Connelly has had to say?
Yeah, so by way of context, the tweet that she did put out was distasteful. It was an awful thing to say. But again, we've all said awful things, and there was the important caveat that she said along the lines of burn down all the migrant hotels for all I care, which for me and for most people with any common sense took it out of the realm of incitement to violence and into a political opinion. So she is now being perceived, I think rightly, as a political prisoner in the United Kingdom. She appealed that sentence, which was extraordinarily unjust. 31 months for that tweet, 31 months in prison. And unfortunately, the judge has said, no, you're going to have to serve every one of those, despite the fact that her husband is suffering from a range of different illnesses, and despite the fact that she has a young daughter. It is absolutely scandalous, particularly when you put it into the broader context of the United Kingdom, where you're seeing rapists getting their sentences cut early, where you're seeing less sentences for actual crimes, for physical crimes, for punching someone in the street, for doing real damage. But unfortunately, those 4 crimes are now punished in many instances more seriously than actual crimes in the country. And the last thing I'll say on this, Gabriella, is that's in a broader context, to Charlie's point, where freedom of speech is under assault. 30 people each day are arrested in the United Kingdom for things they have said online. Now, again, this is A, not what should be done in a Western liberal democracy, but B, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean that you get less Nazi sentiment or less fascist sentiment or whatever. It just drives that or inflames that even more. So this is a very sad, dark day for the United Kingdom, and it needs free speech advocates to stand up and say this is just not on.
Let's talk about what's happening in the United States this week, as Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's book Original Sin, detailing the Democrats' elaborate cover-up of President Joe Biden's cognitive decline. Joe Biden has revealed that he has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, of course, I've said it many times, it's so sad, and he absolutely deserves the best treatment. But there are so many questions, Will, around the timing of this, why he wasn't properly tested for 10 years. What were the people around him doing? Who knew what and when? And, you know, as we've been lied to so many times by the Democratic Party, by Joe Biden himself, he said he wasn't going to pardon Hunter, then he did pardon Hunter. There was COVID. There have been so many lies coming out from Joe Biden and the people around him. What's your reaction hearing this news? Were you sceptical about the timing, about why we're just learning about this right now?
Just a bit sceptical, Gabriella, yeah. The fact of the matter is the former Biden White House and the Democratic Party do not deserve the benefit of the doubt on this. And the fact of the matter is none of it makes any sense. I think this will rightfully come to be revealed as the greatest political scandal in modern American history. There's only 3 things that could have happened here. Either A, they knew about the cancer when he was president and they lied about it. They deliberately withheld it from the public. B, they did not test him for prostate cancer, which is a really easy test. It's a test that Obama got, who was in better shape than Biden. It's a test that Trump gets. It is a common test for blokes over the age of 50, and they chose not to do that, which would be gross medical negligence. Or the third option, which I think is actually the most likely, which is the Biden White House or Jill Biden basically said, do not give him this test because we're afraid of what we will see and we will have to not disclose it. Yeah. But whichever one of those that you choose to believe, they are all a political scandal almost without equal. So questions need to be asked. It is interesting that the Democrats are coming out and saying, well, now that he's sick, we can't have this conversation. We need to hold back. Absolutely not. This needs to be investigated because this goes to the very heart of the so-called democracy that Democrats claim to love so much but have done so much to trash.
Absolutely. Will Kingston, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Welcome back to Australia.
Thanks, Gabriella.
Joining us now is retired CIA Operations Officer and Senior Vice President of Strategic Risk and Intelligence at Continental Strategy, Rick Dellatorre. Rick Dellatorre, thank you for joining us on Power Hour. Let's start with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And the US is awaiting a proposal from Russian President Vladimir Putin that may lead to a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Secretary Marco Rubio says that he does think Putin will cut a deal.
We can all agree on there is no military solution to this crisis. Right. It will have to end in a negotiated settlement. And the fundamental challenge we have in Ukraine is this. Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine wants what they cannot regain militarily. And that's been the crux of the challenge.
What's your assessment of where things are at the moment? Do you think there is enough evidence that Putin is willing to bring this war to an end?
I think the jury's still out on that one, really. I think what we witnessed in the past couple of days is really that Trump did something that other administrations had not done, and that is he didn't seek permission from NATO or the EU or the UN. He just picked up the phone, gave a telephone call to Putin, and had that kind of conversation that we generally want from leaders. This is what peace through strength looks like, when two leaders having a real conversation, not performative posturing, not endless summits where nothing gets done. Trump is doing what Biden never did or could. He's asserting U.S. leadership and testing whether peace is actually on the table. Now, he's not naive about Putin. Putin, he's also not willing to drag America through another endless war, though, just to satisfy defense contractors or NATO bureaucrats. If Putin's serious, we'll see Trump get some results, and if not, Putin will face increased pressure from the U.S. in the form of serious sanctions.
We've also heard from Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's accused Russia of trying to buy time to continue the war in Ukraine. He says that Russia is putting forward unrealistic conditions and must face tough consequences, but Russia maintains it is willing to participate in negotiations. What do you make of Zelensky's comments?
I think he's playing the media and the news correctly, as he should be, right? He's calling Putin's bluff. He's saying, "Hey, I'm here. I'm ready to negotiate. Come along, Putin. Let's go with it." And sadly, the more Putin drags this out, the worse it does look for him in the eyes of others. They are confirming a lot of the biases that those in Europe and many here in the United States have.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has revealed that Pope Leo had confirmed during a phone call with her his willingness to host in the Vatican the next round of negotiations to try and bring the Russia and Ukraine war to an end. What's your response to this?
Well, look, I think that's fine, as long as it's not just for show. This administration, the United States, Trump, supports diplomacy, but only if it leads somewhere, right? If Pope Leo wants peace, well, that's great, but peace without pressure is just performance, right? If Trump's team shows up, it'll be with leverage, not platitudes. So no more empty declarations, no more moral grandstanding. Real diplomacy means consequences for bad actors and results for the people that are paying the bills. The Vatican can certainly host the table, but Trump's team needs to bring the muscle that's required to make something stick at these peace talks.
I want to talk to you about Joe Biden. You've written about his cancer diagnosis and you say that stage 4 doesn't just sneak up on a sitting president surrounded by round-the-clock care, daily briefings and the most comprehensive medical infrastructure on the planet. Either they knew and they hid it, or they were too incompetent to even notice. And after years of watching Biden stumble, mumble and disappear from the public eye, the "we didn't know" excuse doesn't pass the laugh test. So let's stop pretending that Joe Biden was ever truly in charge. So that is the real question. Who was in charge? And Rick, was it his staff? What do you think?
Well, I know his presidency was simply theater. He was a figurehead, the comforting symbol for a party that didn't want leadership. It wanted control. The real decisions came from the back rooms, the activists, handlers, unelected bureaucrats, and the media allies who exist to clean up his messes. Every gaffe was brushed off, right? Every moment of confusion that we witnessed was downplayed. Every bad decision, from Afghanistan to inflation, all those were just spun by the press corps that had already stopped asking the real questions and just became part of the PR machine. So Biden wasn't leading the country. He was reading a teleprompter written by the people who actually were. And the American people saw through it as we went into the election. And that's one of the reasons why Democrats did so poorly in the past election. Joe Biden was a cardboard presidency. Someone else wrote the script and he just read it.
Yeah, and we saw that time and time again, yet we're still finding out more about this cover-up. It's been revealed that millions of dollars were spent on a fake town hall, and Biden's performance was actually so bad that nothing could be used from it. Listen to this.
But Joe Biden, at this point, this is the spring of 2024, Joe Biden's town hall, which was closed to press, was so bad that campaign officials determined that it was not usable for a campaign commercial. So they took 90 minutes, 2 hours out of the president's day. They filmed an entire town hall, and they determined that it was not usable. Now, some people say this was because Joe Biden was incoherent. He could not really articulate his thoughts in a pithy or even semi-normal way. Some people just said, like, the lighting was bad. That was sort of the two points of view. But the point is, it shows how what the campaign status was in the spring of 2024 when they were trying to, deal with a candidate that wasn't a decline.
Wait, someone told you the lighting was bad?
It really just highlights how many people were in on this cover-up.
Yeah, the lighting was bad. Yeah, well, let me put it this way. When a former president cancels a national television town hall and with less than 24 hours notice, it's not because of scheduling conflicts or bad lighting. It's because his inner circle knows what the rest of us already knew, that Biden's no longer capable of handling unscripted pressure, not even in a controlled environment like an apologetic and supportive CNN stage. And what's the reason that they could give you? Well, he was sick, or he wasn't feeling well. Really, yeah, I'm not so sure, right? We're told that he's the same guy who supposedly ran the country during COVID without a scratch, and suddenly he can't sit for an hour worth of questions. So this wasn't about a cold or the lighting or whatever. This was about control. His team pulled the plug because they couldn't risk him going off script again, right? Because this had been continuing on for a couple of years. And now we've got the book Original Sin, written by one of the CNN anchors and authors with Axios, which is starting to quote unquote leak what we all saw, what we already knew. Some of the same folks, like in this case Jake Tapper, he was the one that was making excuses for Joe Biden during those years, and now that it's just I guess more acceptable to come clean with some of these things, or maybe I don't pretend to know the man, but maybe his conscience got a little bit better of him, and he's decided to try to correct his script and his take for a number of years on what was obvious to everyone.
It's also been revealed that top US health officials delayed warning the public for months about heart-related risks linked to the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, according to a scathing interim report from Senator Ron Johnson's office. So the New York Post reports today that Biden officials knew about the potential risks and actually took steps to downplay them. The report claims that federal health agencies had been alerted to large reports of myocarditis in young people who received the Pfizer vaccine as early as February 2021, but didn't update warning labels until late June. Sadly, this doesn't surprise me. Can I get your reaction to this?
It didn't surprise me at all either. I witnessed, I went through that. I received, at the time when I was employed by the CIA at that time, I received my 2 shots in January of 2021. I had my doubts, but at that time, I still believed in the services and in the folks that were telling me that I should take this shot. I regret that. I regret that to today. I remember at the time I had a subordinate of mine, a healthy 22, 23-year-old young man, peak physical fitness, just worked out all the time, just no health issues whatsoever. And within 2 weeks, developed myocarditis. When he went and visited the doctors laughed in his face and they said, "That's impossible. This vaccine's safe. There's nothing to do with that." And then lo and behold, we find out now that 1 in every 5,000 recipients of this vaccine, we're at risk of developing myocarditis. So the Biden officials, they knew this. They knew about the myocarditis risks from the COVID vaccines, and they chose to hide it. And our new FDA secretary or director, I guess, no, excuse me, commissioner for FDA, Marty McCarty, he tried to issue a warning label about the heart inflammation in young men, and was blocked, not debated. It was blocked. So this isn't science. This is politics using science as a shield. The government forced healthy teenagers, soldiers, college students to take a shot they didn't need and covered up the risks in the process. Now, if this had happened under any other administration, for example, if this had happened under Trump, the media would be calling for Nuremberg-style hearings, I guarantee you. But because it's Biden's crew, everyone's silent. So what happened to informed consent? What happened to transparency? Instead of warning parents, they silenced doctors. And instead of adjusting policy, they enforced mandates with no exit ramp. And that's not public health. That's government malpractice.
Rick DeLatorre, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Really appreciate you making the time. Rick DeLatorre, retired CIA Operations Officer and Senior Vice President of Strategic Risk and Intelligence at Continental Strategy. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Meghan Markle's latest podcast venture has spectacularly dropped out of the streaming charts just weeks after hitting the airwaves. Riley Sullivan is a lifestyle reporter here at skynews.com.au, and he is always across the latest celebrity headlines. Riley, it's great to see you.
Great to be back.
Okay, Meghan Markle. So her new podcast series, Confessions of a Female Founder, has failed to burn up the streaming charts. How bad is it really for Meghan's new show?
Yeah, look, this is pretty bad, Gab. I mean, this show was a multi-million-dollar production. This was what she signed up with Lemonada Media for. Came out last month, the first batch of episodes, and it's just been a complete flop. The first episode barely cracked the top 20 on the Spotify top 100 podcast charts. This week, it's out of the top 100 completely. So basically, in a span of a few weeks, the show has completely disappeared without a trace. I think this is a massive PR disaster for Meghan. She chose to interview businesswomen. That was sort of the angle of the show. These sort of high-profile women that have built successful businesses. And she got some great people, the woman that created Bumble, all different types of business people. But, it never rang true because she's not a business person, Gab. She married a member of the royal family, and then they left the royal family and they made a buck, selling some secrets. But she isn't really a business person. So I think on that level alone, it doesn't really work. And I think with podcasting, unlike with Netflix, it's not enough just to have this sort of surfacey stuff.
Of course.
When you want people to tune in every week and listen for 40 minutes, I think it needs a bit of substance. And this show had no substance.
Yeah. Well, David Beckham has enjoyed a very warm catch-up with King Charles and Queen Camilla at the Chelsea Flower Show earlier this week. Do we know what was actually said?
Right. Well, that's the question on everyone's lips because, as we know, things are getting very interesting between the royal family and the Beckhams. Of course, allegedly we had Nicola Peltz and Brooklyn Beckham, who are allegedly having some issues with David and Victoria. They reportedly met with Harry and Meghan recently. So that was, I'm sure, on everyone's minds. And then just a week after that, we've got David with the King and Queen. So I'm not sure, if they really got into it with the whole Harry and Meghan connection. I think it was pretty neutral topics. They stuck to talking about the Chelsea Flower Show, of course. There was a rose there. It's called the King's Rose, which is being shown this year, and all funds go to charity. So that was wonderful. David and Camilla talked about that. So it was funny, but the timing of it just was almost freakish because, here they are, in the tabloids, the Beckhams and the Sussexes, and then here he is with the King just days later. It was quite remarkable.
Absolutely. Now, Princess Catherine took centre stage at her first Buckingham Palace garden party in 2 years this week, where she was joined by more than 800 guests. But why has one special interaction made the headlines?
Yeah, so, I think all eyes are on Kate this week. She was back at Buckingham Palace hosting this garden party. There was over 800 people there, as you said. And it was the dream team. It was Kate and Will, and then the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, Sophie and Edward. So, just really the core royal family there. They hosted all of these people from across the UK. Some of them, I'm sure were there just to see Kate. I mean, pretty exciting to have the Princess of Wales back in action, but certainly all the headlines were about a very special meeting between Kate and two of the guests, and they were Vicky and Aaron, whose daughter sadly passed away from cancer. Her name was Liz, and we actually spoke about it on this show last year. Her wish before she passed away, she was a photographer, was to capture photos of the Prince and Princess of Wales. So she met Will and Kate last year while she was undergoing her cancer treatment. Unfortunately, she has passed away. So I think that was a very sort of somber moment for Kate, but a lovely tribute to be able to host her parents and her family at Buckingham Palace. And what a reminder, I think, as well of, as much as we celebrate someone like Kate going into remission, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't that lucky.
Yeah, it's very true. The mother of Princess Beatrice's stepson has made headlines after weighing in on an infamous moment from Meghan Markle's cooking show. Now, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, well, this was sort of one that flew under the radar. So, of course, we were talking a few weeks ago about that weird moment in Meghan's show where she corrects Mindy Kaling on her name and she says, "I'm Meghan Sussex," and how dare you call me Meghan Markle, basically.
Yeah.
And that has just been viral on social media for weeks. And the Daily Mail, I think it was, they picked up that Dara Huang, who is, of course, the mother of Beatrice's stepson, she actually commented being like, "That was weird." So, which is kind of a funny insight, and she'd know. I mean, she has been around the royal family, and I think it just goes to show how ridiculous that whole thing was.
Oh, wasn't it?
But very funny. But, Dara Huang doesn't speak out very often, so she must have felt quite strongly about this one.
Fair enough. And now the Danish palace has released new photos of Crown Prince Christian completing national service amid rising geopolitical tensions in the region. What's the latest on the prince's military training, and how are Queen Mary and King Frederick dealing with their son's absence?
Right. Well, this has been one of the big stories in Denmark this year. Of course, they have, tensions with Donald Trump over Greenland. There's also tensions with Russia on the other side. So, there is a lot of emphasis at the moment on national security in Denmark. And part of that comes down to national service. They have had male national service for decades, and they're actually introducing it for women as well. Only a few countries do that at the moment, Israel being one of them. So it's a very big topic. And of course, Christian is currently in that time of his life. He is completing national service. He has been living for several months at a very remote military base, undergoing intense sort of military training. And then the palace this week has released some new photos of him doing the training. It was during an exercise, a week-long exercise. They had to march for something like 55 kilometres, surviving off a few hours sleep, very meagre food rations, really kind of sort of simulating what it would be like in wartime. And I think that this is a huge topic in Denmark at the moment. But in terms of the King and Queen, I'm sure it's very difficult for them. It's their son. He is the heir to the Danish throne. But it's something, I think, in their country that is seen as definitely just part of the experience of being Danish and respecting the country and having that nationalism. And so much so that there's even reports that Princess Isabella, his sister, technically, I think she's before the cutoff, so she wouldn't be required to do national service. But I personally believe, I think she will also do it, just to sort of send a message to Danes. So, very interesting. But I'm sure for Mary and Frederick, they'll be very happy when he's home.
Absolutely. Riley Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.